Welcome to the Boxing Life podcast. I'm here with my business partner, Kevan Watson. Kev, how's it going, mate?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, on this episode, we interview Dr. Charles Bernick. Dr. Charles Bernick is a brain doctor. What's the proper word for that?
Neurologist.
Or
neurosurgeon. Or he's not a surgeon. Sorry, neurologist. Yeah.
Neurologist.
Yeah.
And he's based in Las Vegas, the Cleveland Clinic, and he's doing a huge study, I think the biggest study in the world on the boxers' brains, MMA brains, like fighters' brains. So me and Kev went to Vegas, it was a few weeks ago now, and we interviewed him on the podcast. But the main reason why I went was to get some brain scans and get tests on my brain. You know, I've done a podcast episode 32, if you want to go back and listen to that one, where I went to Vegas a year ago and I got some brain tests and helped them with a study on the fighters' brains. And I really wanted to go because I was worried. I remember I told you that time when I started getting worried about my brain and about brain health. And I know you know a lot about brain health now because your mom's gone through a hard time with Alzheimer's. So the first time I went, I got done the tests where you're sitting doing computer things. I think, did you see some of the tests I was doing?
Yeah, you're doing reactions and memory stuff, right?
Reactions, balance, memory, speech, reading, and that sort of stuff. And
did an MRI as well, right?
Then the MRI was after that.
How was that?
Boring as shit, lying there for it.
Those are the worst, man. It's so claustrophobic too.
Yeah, you're squeezed in there and
can't move.
It was like an hour and 10 minutes, and it was so horrible and boring.
Like, dum.
Loud, especially now, like we're the day and age where we're addicted to the phones and shit instantly. So you're sitting there bored as shit. But a year ago I got the results, and he said the results from from the computer tests now, I was average for a 31-year-old. I was 31 at the time, and I was so happy with that because I was worried. But then he said, just because you were average doesn't mean that it's good necessarily, because you could have been above average 3 years ago and then it could be slowly deteriorating, because that's what dementia does. So it's like, oh shit. He said, so come back in a year's time and do the test again, and then we should know a little bit better about that.
Yeah, and that's what's great about these long-term studies is as you collect more data over time, you can make different inferences and draw more conclusions about it. So it's a really cool thing he's doing with CTE, and it's such a big deal now, even with American football. It's becoming something that is just absolutely massive. I know they do a lot of work with football players too there. So
yeah, I know. And then it's funny because I never knew anything about American football before I come here. People were like, oh, they suffer from head trauma, and I was like, nah, surely not. But they really do, and it's very serious.
There's a car crash every single play, you know. And I'm to the point, and it's funny, my roommate works for the NFL Network, but I'm to the point where I'm thinking, 10 years from now, I don't know if football is if it's gonna be around anymore.
Right.
What if they do now with kids football? They're all playing flag football. Like when I was young, I think I started at like 12 or 13. You're playing tackle football from that age, and so now they're like kind of pushing that age back, and those kids are playing flag football until they get to like high school, and then they're letting them play tackle.
Banging heads all the time.
Yeah.
And like we said, to get these proper results from the brain test, you've got to keep going back and doing it again, which is frustrating for me because I want to know right now if the brain's all right. But like, I think with CTE, well, I know with CTE you can't find out if you've got CTE until you're dead and you do a brain test.
Yeah, that's what I've heard the same. I mean, I can't say I know too much about it, but I've heard that as well.
Yeah. So we went to Vegas. I got the second the brain test, and on this podcast he reads the results live to us, so listen up and listen to what Dr. Charles says, and then we get into some stuff with Alzheimer's and dementia, talk about that. And did you know, Kev, that now, I know you've told me some crazy facts about Alzheimer's, but now this year dementia is the biggest killer in the UK.
Is it?
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me. Like it's up and coming, and it's becoming one of those things where you can't sweep it under the rug anymore. And what's really great, I think, is Bill Gates just recently donated so much money. I think it was it billion or million? I can't remember. Maybe it was 10 million, I think, to to Alzheimer's research, and a name like that's putting that kind of money into it and backing it, a big name like that. It's now it's getting a lot of play, it's getting a lot of airtime, if you will, and people are really starting to kind of acknowledge it. And what's really cool is Charles Bernick. I mean, he's doing CTE stuff now, but he's one of the leading experts in Alzheimer's and dementia. He has 20 plus years in it, so it was kind of cool to talk with him about that. And get some feedback from him.
Last year in the UK, there was 70,366 people died of Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Compared to 66,000 that died of heart disease, because heart disease was the biggest killer before Alzheimer's. So and so now, like you see, people starting to take notice of it. Because I think before, this is something you might have said like a while ago, people just thought, oh, it's old age.
Right.
And that's what it got classed as, old age, but it's not.
They're senile kind of thing. And now that people are getting diagnosed younger, but people are living longer, that age range of people living with the disease is just growing, and it's definitely an epidemic.
Yeah. So dementia describes a set of symptoms associated with declining of the brain, with memory loss, thinking deficiency. And that's the big thing. I was worried about myself, about the way I was thinking. I wasn't thinking straight, but then I thought we've got so much shit going on with the gyms. And as well, I think the more you think about it, the more every little thing stands out more, you're highlighting it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of that spotlight effect. If you just think about it and you mull over and over in your head, you're going to kind of become paranoid about it a little bit. I do the same thing. I mean, now that my mom has Alzheimer's, and I forget things. I'm like, shit, I'm only 31, but because it's very hereditary, so it becomes something you're very conscious about.
Yeah. So with the Cleveland Clinic in Vegas and this test that I've done, the great thing about these studies is you don't have to pay to get this. They pay for it. They pay for you. They pay for your travel, your accommodation. So if you've only had to have one professional fight to do it. You can't be an amateur boxer. You've got to be a professional. If you're in America, they will fly you anywhere from America, and I think maybe Canada, to Las Vegas to do the tests. If you're from the UK, unfortunately, they'll not. They'll pay for your international flight, but they will fly. But if you fly to America, they'll fly from wherever you are in America. And I really recommend any boxer doing this. And there was people saying to me before I'd done the test, like, why do you want to find out? If you can find out, there's nothing you can do anyway. It's dementia. There's not a cure for it. But on this podcast, when we interviewed the doctor, he tells us, like, the reasons why you should find out if you have got it. And there is things that you can do. And if you're more aware of it, obviously the better it's going to be. Yeah,
things, health and nutrition, everything, and just lifestyle change, and exactly. You need to identify a problem if there is a problem with anything, and then you can address it. Even, you may not be able to change that deterioration or whatever it is that's happening in the brain, but you can certainly prolong and extend and deal with quality of life in a different way.
Yeah, big time. So. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get in touch with the Cleveland Clinic, just Google Cleveland Clinic Vegas, or the lady who takes their appointments is great. She's called Pam Dino, and you can email her at dinop, so it's dinop, DINOP for Peter, at ccf.org. I'm sure you'll find information on the Cleveland Clinic website. And things like this, I was doing a podcast yesterday, I was a guest on a podcast yesterday, and they said, how can people find you? And I say, well, if you want to find us, you'll find us. If you want to find where this woman is, you'll find us.
They've got tons of resources. It was great about the Cleveland Clinic. We walked in that library, and they had so many different resources, and the lady was so helpful. Get online, and you can get all of those resources as well, I'm sure. So
I really recommend this for boxers to go and get tested out, So here it is, the Boxing Life podcast with Dr. Charles Bernick, Kevan Watson, and myself, Tony Jeffries. Enjoy. Dr. Charles Bernick, how are you doing, mate?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you for coming on this on the Boxing Life podcast. Can we start off, and if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a neurologist with the Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas, and have a particular interest in long-term effects of head trauma. So we're now involved in a large study, over 750 fighters, and following them over time to really understand better what does happen to people.
So how long has this been going on here at the Cleveland Clinic?
So the study started in 2011, so now we're into the 6th year, although not all of the folks have gone 6 years.
Right.
But the hope is to track individuals on a yearly basis and see what happens and try to determine why some athletes who have been exposed to repetitive head trauma end up with these long-term brain conditions.
Right.
The one that's most commonly acknowledged is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE.
Yeah. So you've been doing it for 6 years, and you said you've done 750 fighters.
Exactly.
Boxers and UFC, right?
Boxers and MMA, yeah.
Right. So how long is the study going to go on for? Is it going to be an ongoing thing, or?
Yeah, the longer we keep it going, the more we're going to learn.
Yeah.
So as long as we can support it financially and keep the interest of the participants, the hope is to really follow people through their career.
Yeah. So I did a study a year ago, just over a year ago now, and when I came in last time, you told me my score was average for a 31-year-old. I was 31 at the time. Which I was very happy with, but at the same time, it was like we don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing, because 4 years ago, it might have been above average, it might be going down. So you said come back in a year and we'll do it again and see where you are. So I'm here a year later, and now I've just done the test again, and now you're going to tell us the results.
Well, keep in mind the results are not... we don't know that if you score the same, or if you score a little less, or you score a little more, that means there's a disease process or something going. So you have to take all this stuff with a grain of salt. Specifically for you, you actually scored better in some of the tests this year. Probably because you're more comfortable in doing the test, or you're used to doing it after having it done the first year. So actually, as we look,
because when you first said that there, when you were like, well, it doesn't, I thought I was going to say, well, you went down.
Yeah, no. Well, you can see on the iPad-based test that you actually were faster at doing some of the tasks. These are the scores last year and this year, so you're actually faster. You got more correct on one of the other question tests that looked at the matching digits and symbols. Yeah. Your dynamic visual acuity is about the same, and your reaction time's about the same. So even in one return visit, we're not totally confident. So I think as we get people back 3, 4, or 5 times, then we really get a sense of their trend. Is their trajectory going down? Is it about the same? Because you always have a little variability. You come in, you're tired, whatever. So the whole key to this process is to get athletes back and follow them over time. Yeah.
So how long do you think it would take before you can see it? Like, is it like if we're going to be 5 years, come back in another year, and then it's going to be like, yeah, we can see.
I think we would feel more confident if we have, let's say, 3 or 4 time points.
Yeah.
Even with the imaging of the brain, there can always be little variabilities from one test to another. So you do need a couple of points of reference. You can't, or points to follow up. Looking at a person at one point in time is not always that reliable.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to tell me a little bit about CTE?
Sure. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. There's, of course, a great attention to it now, particularly in this country because of American football. But it's a condition we know that's certainly due to repetitive head trauma, though that's probably not the only factor because some people don't get it. And it's a degenerative brain disease. That is, that even after you're finished being exposed to head trauma, it continues to progress in the brain in those that have it. Right. We find a buildup of a protein in the brain called tau, and somehow it seems to spread through the brain, wiping out brain cells as it goes along. Yeah.
So as well, last time, I don't know if you remember, because I know you've studied that many fighters, you called me after my brain scan results, and you told me that my membrane's got a split in.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's called a cavum septum pellucidum. So there's a membrane that separates the two areas of the brain where the fluid circulates, so called ventricles. With repetitive head trauma, often we see that membrane split into two. It's very common in fighters. Probably over 50% will have it. Happens in normal people too, probably about 17 or 20%. So it definitely can happen anyway, just as the brain develops. But clearly, it happens much more often if the brain is traumatized. And we know that at a group level, just looking at a large number of people, the larger the cavum septum pellucidum, the more likely there may be cognitive impairment.
Right.
So it doesn't mean if you have it, you're going to be impaired, but there are these rough relationships.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that the split happens by you get punched in the head, your brain shakes, and that's what causes the split?
Yeah, actually, nobody really knows. That's one theory, is that it just has to do with pressure waves and that it traumatizes, again, this very thin membrane. So all we really know is that it's a marker of head trauma. It's probably not causes anything. It's just a marker of how a lot of hits to the head.
Yeah. Because I remember when you first told me that, I was a bit devastated, even though you said like there's no evidence that it can affect you in life. But just knowing that you've got something wrong, is it wrong with you that can't never get fixed? You know.
Well, it's a common finding. Even people, for example, we have a retired NFL football player here, all pro for many, many years. He's an attorney at the age of 70. He has a huge cavum septum pellucidum. So it doesn't always correlate with how you're functioning, but I think, again, it just reflects the fact that you've probably been exposed to head trauma.
Right. Yeah. You got that, but that.
Well, you want to do the CTE stuff first, and I'd love to dive into a little bit of Alzheimer's stuff, but if you want to...
Yeah. So if there's a fighter that's got CTE, what are the symptoms? Is there any early symptoms of CTE?
Sure. And actually, it may differ depending on the sport. So with fighters, you tend to see, slurred speech, as you know, but you can see cognitive changes, memory, processing information, behavior, so explosiveness, poor impulse control, depression. The problem with some of those symptoms is it's hard to tease out if it's just life circumstances that causes it, or is it really a brain disease. But when somebody starts having more progressive memory problems and just ability to care for themselves, that's a disease process.
Right. And I remember last time you told me the best thing to do was exercise. Is that right?
Well,
or one of the best things.
Yeah, we're extrapolating that from information we have in other brain diseases and in normal aging, that exercise produces in the brain chemicals that protect cells, and you can stimulate stem cells in the brain with exercise. So it does have a protective effect, and so the idea is if it may help some of these other conditions, it may have some effect at maybe modifying or modulating CTE.
Yeah. I'm guessing diet's a big thing as well.
Diet's a little harder to get a hand on. People talk about Mediterranean-type diets, so green leafy vegetables, berries, things like that have antioxidant properties. And again, antioxidant properties can help protect cells from injury.
Right.
So that's the thought of that.
Okay. Anything else that you would recommend to boxers who of course, we get a lot of boxers listening to this, who think that they might be starting to suffer from that?
Well, one of the things is to get checked out because, there's a lot of things that can affect memory. So it could be thyroid problems, it could be alcohol use, it could be depression, sleep disorders like sleep apnea. So there's a lot of things. So I wouldn't just kind of presume it's, CTE. I think that's the first thing. For fighters that are actively training, I'm not saying this facetiously. You gotta not get hit in the head. So in training, I think the big thing, of course, is in training that and I've talked to fighters now, particularly at higher levels, that are doing less sparring or less hard sparring, and understand that if you go into a fight having even had a mild concussion at some point, that puts you at a disadvantage.
Right.
And so people really need to protect themselves in training.
What about the whole dropping weight and in such a short amount of time, and then being able to rehydrate or trying to rehydrate the next day, and that kind of takes a lot of the fluid and the protection in the brain? Is there some truth to that? Is that
we don't know. So you would think that, but there's not a lot of experimental evidence that it affects it. One thing we really don't know is how fast you can rehydrate the brain.
Sure.
So it may be that frankly, you could rehydrate it pretty quick. But nobody's done really experiments to show that. So we don't know the effect of weight cutting. Even though it's so common, we don't know what effect it has on risk of concussion.
Okay. When I've told people I'm coming here to check my brain and all that, and a few people said, well, why? Because if you find out, what's the benefits of finding out if you've got early dementia or something like that? What would be the benefit of someone coming into the Cleveland Clinic and finding this stuff out?
Well, again, so one reason would be to be sure you don't have something else that's treatable. Second, there can be things to treat the symptoms of this, certainly behavioral symptoms, maybe even memory and attention. There are cognitive exercises you can do. There's a lot of rehab things you could do. Again, maybe these don't cure the disease, but they can keep you at a higher level of function. So I think there's a reason. But frankly, we cannot be sure at this point somebody has CTE. We have no diagnostic tests at the moment.
Yeah, there's a great show out there. It's called A Fighter's Brain, about a guy called Paul Pender. Have you heard of that?
I haven't.
He was one of the first guys that they did the experiment on about the brains, and he donated his brain because he died of CTE years and years ago. And I just thought that was a very interesting show. So if you listen to this, I would recommend that. I think it's on iTunes. I would like you to watch that as well, Doctor, if you ever get time.
Yeah.
But yeah, mate. So moving forward for me, talking about my results, any recommendations? Anything I can do?
Well, nothing we've found on you yet. So I mean, we'll look at your scan. But no, I think it's really doing all the kind of brain health recommendations that we have. So again, the aerobic exercise is the key. Aerobic exercise, diet rich in antioxidants, staying engaged, keeping your mind active. I don't think there's any magic. So in other words, we don't know of like any supplements that you should be taking and things like that. We can't recommend that because we don't know. We don't know they do anything aside from being a placebo effect, you know. Yeah. But I think a lot of just good diet, lifestyle, that's probably will get you longer than anything else. So
I've not drank all year. I had a New Year's resolution not to have some alcohol this year, and I had a feeling that I think with that, because last time I come out, I used to be drinking like 3 or 4 times a week. For that, I thought, I bet you my results are better, and my results are better. So
well, there you go.
Take credit for that.
You got a pretty thick skull too. So.
Yeah, there you go.
So Kevin's mom's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's now, and I know you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just a couple questions. I'm sure you get these a lot. But first, I want to say thanks for having us here, and I really do admire everything you do.
Thank you.
But yeah, my mom was diagnosed at 62, so that was about 4 years ago. She's 66 now, early onset. I guess just a generic question. In your opinion, I mean, why do you think Alzheimer's is becoming so prevalent now? You know, there's 6 million people that currently have it. They're saying maybe 15 million by 2050. 1 in 3 seniors dies from Alzheimer's. Every 66 seconds, someone's diagnosed. And it's the 6th leading cause of death. Why do you think it's so much more prevalent? Is it because there's more awareness, or is it lifestyle? Or?
I think a couple of things. I think awareness is one. That is, we're better at diagnosing it. In the past, a lot of people, particularly as they got older, were just said to have senility and or hardening of the arteries or whatever. The other, of course, is people are living longer. So it is a disease generally of aging. The young onset cases are not as common, but although they definitely occur. But, the older you are, the more likely you're going to develop it. So now as people are living into their mid-80s, their 90s, the numbers are going to be so much higher now.
Sure.
And then the other thing is people are living longer with the disease. So whereas, again, if somebody developed it when they're 80, they might have died at 82 of a heart attack. Now people are going into their 90s. And so it's certainly a public health problem we're all going to have to address. The good news is that there's a lot of research that is moving forward on not only the diagnosis of it, but also treatments.
Why do you think it's such a political thing to raise money for it? I mean, I think Congress passed a bill for $400 million last year. I believe that's what it was. But it seems to be like kind of pulling teeth to get money for that disease and that cause.
It is, because it's not as sexy. It's a disease of aging. people, I think there's this kind of nihilism of, if you make it to 80, how many more good years, as opposed to, let's say, AIDS or cancer or things like that. Not that those aren't important, but I think it's just that, because they can impact people much younger, and sometimes the results of those diseases are more acute. That is, somebody develops cancer and they may be gone, in a relatively short period of time, whereas Alzheimer's disease, it just goes on for years and years and years and years. So I think it's hopefully that tide will turn and that more emphasis will be put on Alzheimer's disease. But that's my sense of it, is because it's just this disease of the end of life. For many people, there's just not that much interest.
Yeah.
Or as much.
Sure. So do you think, in your opinion, as far as a lot of people are pointing the finger towards like a lot of food additives, artificial sweeteners, and diet choices, do you think, is there some real direct correlations to those things, do you think?
Not that we know of. So the biggest risks, of course, are your age and your genetics. So those are far and away the two most important risk factors. There may be other things. Head trauma, for example, has been talked about, and other diseases, so diabetes, hypertension, there may be a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease down the line. So there are probably other risk factors, but the two things you can't do anything about, aging and your genetics, just stand way above everything else.
Okay, got it. So as research continues and more funding is kind of put into this stuff, you think there'll be more emphasis put on avoiding and kind of prevention rather than actually finding a cure? Or do you think finding a cure and reversing it is a possibility?
Well, I think in some sense it's going to be both. That is, even now, as we speak, there are Alzheimer's disease prevention trials. And that's because we have the ability now to predict who's going to develop the disease within 7 or 8 years by using a brain imaging, PET imaging test. And there are drugs that are being tested, not on the market yet, but being tested that remove the protein that causes Alzheimer's disease, amyloid. So the thought is, if you can identify a person who's at risk and you could treat them before they have symptoms, you in some sense can prevent the disease, or at least prevent dementia, which is the more extended part of the disease where you're having a lot of cognitive impairment. So I think it's promising. I think it's not going to be this year or next year, but I think probably in the next 5 years we'll know about some of these drugs.
Wow. Yeah, I remember seeing, I think, and you probably saw in 60 Minutes, it was several months back, but I think there was some society, I think maybe it was in like Colombia or Medellin, where there was some people even as early as 30 that were being diagnosed, and it's just one particular family. It's like 1 in 2. Can you explain that a little bit? Do you know much?
Well, that's familial Alzheimer's disease, and we know that there are certain mutations in genetic mutations. So that's a gene that has an error on it that can be passed on, and if you inherit that error, you will get the disease 100%, and you'll get it at a young age.
Okay.
And there is a extended family in Colombia that has been studied just because you can predict who's going to get the disease way ahead of time. You do their genetics, they're going to get the disease. So that's not common, but it's a way that scientists or researchers can understand the progression of the disease and also look at targets for early intervention.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I know we've not got much time left, Doctor. I know you're a very busy man. I was just going to say, if there's any fighters out there want to get in touch, what's the best way to come and do here what after?
Yeah, I would love to have fighters involved. The best way is to contact the Cleveland Clinic and just ask for our research department. So I can give you the number if you want. But it's, I think the more people are willing to participate and volunteer, the sooner we're going to get an answer to some of this.
I think it's a fantastic thing what you're doing. And everything that we spoke about today will be in the show notes on boxandlifepodcast.com/73 or 74. I'll put it in. But yeah, Doctor, thank you very much for coming on this show.
Oh, I appreciate you all coming down and appreciate you being part of this project. It means a lot to us, and hopefully we'll be seeing you back next year
with even better results.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, sounds good.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Oh, Glenn's here. Oh, sorry, mate. I forgot you were here.